And those apprentices designed and helped him with the thing, broke the world record. Any recognition for that? Forget about it. Some of the things that happen in this country are unbelievable. Unbelievable. But 90% of corporate Australia is owned by multinationals, and as Jim Kalali stated on the 28th of October 1996, they've paid little tax or no tax since then. Now they're going to say we've got 30 companies. In 1996 there were 7,000 companies claiming international status. In 1998, in the Courier Mail, 100 companies earning in excess of 300 million in Queensland, no tax. They've just woke up to Google, Apple and the other mob, they're paying nothing. They're ferrying it all. They must think we're stupid, like it's been going on since 1953. And unless we regenerate our rural industries, and the industries that lived off the rural industries with the machinery and everything else, and gave tariff protection, America's got massive, you can't go to America, you go try and export anything to America, tariff. Try and export, go to China and buy a block of ground. You know that airport you came in? Get on the next Qantas flight and go back and not getting anything. Can't do it in Japan. Then they say if we tax the multinationals, they'll leave. Go to Japan, 52% tax. You can't do it. In Australia, there's 90% of corporate Australia is owned by multinationals. The highest in the rest of Japan, and about 10.1. America's 3.2. England, off the top of my head, they mightn't be exactly about 2.1. They won't let you in. But they'll let them in here. We've got no tariff protection for our farmers. Now Walmart or Wilmot is going to control the sugarcane industry. The loss of our farmers. And all the auxiliary companies and work that was attached to it, they're all going. We imported, we're the 7th largest sugarcane exporter in the world. So we signed a trade agreement, so they bring in sugarcane from Argentina, Mauritius and Brazil and cripple our sugarcane industry. I got the stuff here. Loss of farmers, what's that for? Now when I said about the United Nations and what we've done, now you would reckon the man that was that was in charge of all our military affairs, the United Nations military affairs, and all the United Nations nuclear bombs, have to be a very forthright person and very conscious of peace. Well, there was an agreement. See, the United Nations International Monetary Fund is only in the same building in America. So you would reckon the person that's in charge of all that would have to be a very, very smart man with his finger on the pulse. Here's a little out of the United Nations book. Under the Charter of the United Nations, any United Nations peace force will be under the command of the Under-Secretary General for Political and Security Council Affairs. This person who has control of all United Nations military affairs, including all nuclear weapons that we furnish to the United Nations. Now, bearing in mind, since the Second World War, we've been to the Korean War, the Malaysian invasion, the Middle East invasion, the one up near New Guinea, then we've been in all the Middle East. Well, since 1946, since the inception of it, and remember, after the Second World War, the Cold War was on, and you wasn't allowed into Russia, and you wasn't allowed to take a photo or anything like that, and America was against them, and America supplied all the army for South Korea, and Russia supplied for North Korea. So you can't get in there. So they'd have the Red Square, and all the machinery and the bombs and everything else would come along, and people would get the fear of Christ in them. Well, the man that's been in charge of all that, he's got to be a top-notch bloke. And Russia has always been a communist country, and we've got to be fearful of it. 46 to 49, Arkadiev Shoglev, USSR. 49 to 53, Konstantin Zinchenko. 53 to 54, Ilya Trochanev. 54 to 57, Dragolev. It's all Russians. I won't keep going because I want to cover a bit of ground. So when you start thinking about the United Nations as the policeman of the world and everything like that, this is what we've been subjected to. Now this is what we have. I have to put my spectaculars on if I can find them. Here they are. These are figures from 1960 to 2004 because of these Lima declarations and these other treaties that we've signed. In 1960 we had 50,000 pork farmers. In 2004 we had 3,000. We had 70,000 dairy farmers. 2004 we had 11,000. 52,000 sheep farmers, 14,000. We've signed all these agreements to give other countries a share of the trade balances. But not every country does it, only us. And when you consider, if you've got this, you could go and get this book, Tracy Spicer, I spoke with her a lot of times, she did a lot of research, who's buying Australia up. And he's a bloke, he sent me down this article, up in Innisfail, when they did that, his price for sugar just went right down and they can't survive. But in America, they'll subsidise their farming because it's cheaper to subsidise it and help the tariff than have unemployment. But here we think the way we get out of all these problems is tax someone. As Karl Marx said, taxation is a political tool to harness and control a country. And Winston Churchill said you can't tax a country into prosperity. And that they say that all the workers are complaining about, they go wage rise and everything else. Reason being they've been heavily taxed. So if the top end of town paid tax, it will ease the burden on the lower section. Our Australian businesses can't compete with the multinational businesses. You have to, like, all the farmers can't compete with imports because they just flood the market. There's Young, the cherry capital of Australia, beautiful country. All we're selling Californian cherries. And the cherry farms going broke. It's true. We go down to Riverina, ploughing all the oranges in. We bring them in from Brazil. We brought in apples from New Zealand, and it had apple blight. They've got the disease now in the bananas in Queensland. Now we've got Indonesia going to buy 400,000 square acres or something of land for their cattle, to grow their own cattle. China want to come out and grow their own cattle. They've sold Tubby Station. That'll cripple our cotton farmers because they won't be paying income tax. They'll be just taking goods from A to B, no money transaction. So there's going to be no tax on it. But they'll use all our infrastructure and water the taxpayers paid for to benefit their own shareholders. And as this gentleman just said about J.P. Morgan and Rothschild, one of those people financed Hitler. With that book I just showed you, Wall Street, this book here, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, you can buy it at the Heritage Bookshop in Collins Street, Melbourne. How I come to know all about that, a friend of mine that I was mixed up with horses, he reported he was a court reporter, a lawyer, he could write 200 something words a minute in 6 languages, and he explained a lot of whatnot. See, the terms of reference for the Nuremberg trial, America drafted them, and if you supplied the material, you didn't get charged. But if you used it over there and killed someone, you were charged. So they protected their own industry, and they had where you could bomb over the office. Crazy, bad. But getting back to the sellout of Australia, unless we reinvigorate our manufacturing, like all those companies I just told you within 15 kilometres of here, similar to that was in Melbourne and Brisbane, Melbourne and Queensland and Victoria and South Australia. They've all been wiped out too. There's Cockatoo Island. We fixed the Melbourne up there. All the Yanks used to say, anything wrong with your ship or your plane, go to Australia. They make machine guns out of coat hangers. It's a funny thing, I've just mentioned this machine gun. The old machine gun which saved Australia up the Kokoda Trail. The bloke was in jail when he invented that. And it could work underwater. The Yanks were amazed with it. These are the things we've done. We don't even make our own ammunition anymore. They're trying to make us interdependent instead of independent. And the reason being, it's all about a one world government and new world order. And on the 9th of the 11th, 1990, George Bush's address to Congress, I've got the copy here somewhere, I've got it here. George Bush's address to Congress on the 9th of the 11th, 1990. We stand at a unique and extraordinary moment. This crisis in the Persian Gulf, as grave as it is, also offers us a rare opportunity towards an historic period of cooperation. Out of these troubled times, our objective is a new world order can emerge. A new era freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, more secure in the quest of peace. An era in which all nations of the world, east, west, north and south, can prosper and live in harmony. That'll never happen. But we'll crank up a war machine, and we'll put the fear of God in people, and we'll tax people to do this and do that, and it's just a revolving door, and the Agenda 21 stops you over, that's there to reduce all ownership, reduce our farming activity, but they're not going to do it anywhere else in the world. because we've got it here, and they want us to be the quarry and the supplier instead of the innovators. There's the bloke that in Victoria, Robert Rewald, how he reinvented how you can harvest and grow grain. No one in the world can do it. Go up to the Ord River and see what they do up there. Unbelievable. They can grow rice so they're better than Japan. There's nothing here we can't do better than anyone else in the world. But they don't want to let it do it because we be the world leaders.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Yes, please.
I can talk underwater with a mouthful of concrete. I've just got Now, this is an extract out of the USA Bankers magazine. Now, Warburg and Farberg and J.P. Morgan, the Chase Bank, the Manhattan Bank. George Bush's grandfather, one of the leading financiers, he worked for the Herman Brown Union Banking Corporation. He one of the leading financiers to Hitler. He worked out of the Wall Street. So they all went to Harvard and Yale, and that's where the Skull and Bones organisation emanated from and everything else. Now this is an extract out of the USA Bankers magazine, August the 25th, 1924. It's been updated in 1931. Capital must protect itself in every possible manner by combination legislation. Debts must be collected. Bonds and mortgages foreclosed as rapidly as possible. When through the process of law the common people lose their homes, they'll become more docile and more easily governed through the influence of the strong arm of government applied by the central power of wealth under the control of leading financiers. This truth is well known amongst our principal men who are now engaged in forming an imperialism of capital to govern the world. By dividing the voters through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting over questions of no real importance, and thus by discreet action we will secure for ourselves what has been so well planned and will be so successfully accomplished. Now that's what they're up to with Agenda 21, this Trans-Pacific Partnership, all done in secrecy. Did we ask the politicians, why can't they come up and say, then they'll say, we've signed it, now you can offer your opinion, but it won't matter, but you've had a go at it, we just don't care. We're burdened with them from cradle to grave, we're burdened with them with what all these legislation that they inflict on us, and then we're burdened until they die with a massive pension that they award themselves, and the lack of luxury which they wouldn't be able to acquire if they were in private enterprise because they haven't got the ability. And what we've got to do is go back to you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've just got to abide by our constitution and follow what other countries done with their manufacturing and our farming, and we're world leaders. There's no one in the world can equal what we can do in Australia. And I was very humbled and grateful when I went to just down here in Martin Place to the Anzac March. And I was very grateful for the opportunities that I've had in this country that enabled me to get where I am today. The thing about tax, on a $640,000 home, I've got the article here, there's $239,000 in hidden taxes. So how are young people going to afford a house? This is all part, they'll make you subservient. You're going to rent off these people instead of owning your own home. And when I was growing up, that was our goal, to own our place. So I'll finish there. We've got the greatest country, we've got the greatest people, we've got the greatest innovators, we've got all the minerals and all the resources that's required. It just needs a captain at the helm to say, let's capitalise on it.
Now, our third speaker in the panel this evening is Mr. Nick Folks. Nick Folks, Chairman of the Party for Freedom. That was a small mistake on your flyer. Party for Freedom is the name. An issues-based patriotic party. He lives in Sydney, is married with 2 children, and concerned that Australia's future direction, especially foreign ownership and changing demographies. So he'll fill you in on that. Welcome, Nick Folks.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, David, for inviting me to speak tonight. That was brilliant, John. I really enjoyed it, mate. I'm the chairman of the Party for Freedom. We've been around for a little bit. I'm really concerned about foreign ownership and also the change in demographics in Australia. It's sort of like, I'm only 45 and I feel like I'm 95, just seeing all the changes. And, we don't mind seeing change, but as long as it's good, but all the change that I'm seeing is negative. And, I've got 2 kids, like, David said, I'm very concerned about Australia's future, and absolutely we have so much potential and there's just no political willpower. It's so sad at the moment. But my talk tonight is entitled The Land of Tomorrow Has Become the Land of Yesterday. And this is a story about Australia's rise and fall into economic and identity servitude. In 1948, Joe Greenberg designed a poster with the slogan, Australia, Land of Tomorrow. The poster was produced by the Immigration Department to promote European immigration to Australia. The poster was displayed in displaced persons camps in Europe. The colourful and lively illustration captured the imagination of many refugees and influenced them to migrate to Australia. And here it is, you know, the new frontier, you know, just so lively and just all the prospects of a new country. And you look at Australia today and it's in stark contrast of what it was back then in 1948, the opportunities. And my mother was one of those refugees that came from through China, and the opportunities. And my grandmother worked at British GE for 17 years in the production line, and all those jobs that were there. It was just, you know, it's sad to see Australia today, it really is. But anyway, I'll continue with my talk. Robert Menzies, leader of the Australian United Party, came to power in 1939, and this was a difficult time for Australia as war was imminent. And despite Chamberlain's cowardly attempts to appease the Nazis, on the 1st of September, a date that I always remember because it's my birthday, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Britain declared war on Nazi Germany on the 3rd of September, and Australia subsequently followed Britain and declared war on Germany. The Australian economy boomed throughout the Second World War due to the economic policies of the Menzies and Curtin governments. Curtin won the federal election in 1941 and stimulated economic growth by maintaining high tariffs, awarding government contracts to local industry, encouraging import replacement, and regulating monopolies that nationalised ammunition and heavy industry production. During the difficult war years, Curtin enacted sweeping social changes, but through his sound economic policies was able to maintain stellar economic growth and maintain budget surpluses. Australia was in a unique economic position despite the turmoil of war with Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. In 1941, the Curtin government announced Asians who were British subjects became eligible for a pension, and in 1942 extended the pension to Kanakas, Pacific Islanders and also Aborigines. His government also advanced the welfare state, introducing war and widow pensions. Australia's economic good times continued after the passing of Curtin in 1945, with Ben Chifley taking office. Chifley was also a staunch economic protectionist, union man and identity realist similar to Curtin. Both men were proud of their achievements and commitments to expanding Australian industry and jobs. Australia's most controversial and greatest immigration minister, Arthur Corwell, became Minister for Immigration when the Chifley government was sworn in after winning the 1945 election. Corwell was a supporter of large-scale European immigration and became famous for his relentless advocacy of it. Corwell was sickened by the barbarity of Imperial Japan during World War II. The war had a resounding effect on him, causing him to maintain restrictions on Japanese immigration. The retarded Marxist fools of today